fun little presentation that was put together years ago by Keen O'Kelly, who went to the that button. I should know
Should we go through this? We start with this every week, so.
Yeah, this is always. Alright, so this is the very extremely basic 0x0 intro to hacking that one of our best members ever put together many years ago. So this is more or less just a collection of resources that we throw out there, and this is all made available to you guys online with lots of links and lots of good stuff that you should be checking out. If you're interested in learning anything like this on your own time, doing, you want to just really get into anything like this. So right off the bat, you want to be a hacker, you want to do computer security stuff, you want to do all the cool things that you've seen in every spy movie ever. So where can you work? Like it says, basically anywhere. Like every company out there has some kind of infrastructure that they need to keep safe, and they are looking for some experienced security people to do that. So, some of the main examples given here are finance, healthcare, just technology in general, and then consulting. Consulting stuff, if you were here last week, you probably heard quite a bit from some RSM pen testing consultants about the fun stuff they get to do going around every week, breaking into different systems. You can work for the government. I know that Keen, who put this together, is now somewhere on the East Coast doing something shadowy and suspicious, allegedly. So that's kind of fun. Also, just other general government stuff. And then you've got your research labs, stuff like that. I think Argonne National Lab does some fun stuff there. And then there's military stuff as well. And like that said, there's currently a shortage of InfoSec professionals. At the end of this, we've got a really cool heat map that shows how many jobs are open in InfoSec right now versus how many qualified professionals exist to fill those roles in every metro area around the country. And the moral of that story is that it's currently a very good time to be interested in security. Like I said, lots of different kinds of jobs out there. You've got your offensive stuff where you're breaking into things. You've got your defensive stuff where you're trying to stop people from breaking into things. You've got your policy jobs, which is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Every government in the world is trying to find some way to, or has some arguably outdated laws governing cybercrime and just information security in general. Some of you might have been following the fun little situation with the Iowa state government regarding a penetration test gone awry. That's kind of fun. So there's definitely room for people who are interested in political science or policy making to get out there and help fix some broken legal systems. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with forensics. Digital forensics incident response is a big thing with, okay, somebody broke into this computer or somebody used this computer to commit a crime. How do we prove that definitively in a court of law, or find out who did what on this? And lots of fun research things. There's really cool reverse engineering stuff going on out there, which at some point we should bring Nick back to talk about that, by the way. Cabinet, hint. There's reverse engineering is a lot of fun, just tearing programs apart to see how they work. There's the idea of doing behavior analyzing IDS stuff is pretty fun. There's a lot of work being done right now with AI and machine learning to try and make computers learn how to detect weird stuff happening in a network and flag that, which is kind of fun. Finding bugs, secure coding practices, that's a big thing right now, obviously. It's just always a big thing. This is pretty obvious stuff that we've been yelling at you twice every meeting, and if you have me in 2:30, every lab section ever. Come to these meetings, compete in competitions, ask questions, which if I didn't say this at the beginning, at any point when I'm presenting, feel free to interrupt by yelling out questions or comments or something like that, because Ardens does not go for you. Feel free to just interrupt with questions, because that is how you learn things. Use your resources, which we're going to get into here. This is why you want to come find this presentation online and click on all these links and see what all these things do. So there's some communities on Reddit that say they talk about information security. I don't know why we keep that one on there, to be honest. The Security Stack Exchange is very good. Nullbyte, Hack This Site. So a couple of those, like Hack This Site and Over the Wire, stuff like that. We should have hackathons on there. This will be updated. Lots of good resources where you can just go and learn how to break into things. They just host resources that you can, in fact, just attack. The cyberbear.io, which we will have someone talk about at some point. Jacob, you want to talk about that literally right now?
I don't know who that is. What?
Cool. Like, genuinely, come up here for like 30 seconds and plug your site.
Okay, do you want me to actually?
Yeah. Please.
Okay.
Like, action.
Okay. So, from my experience, security was kind of hard to get into. It's a really broad field, and so a lot of people don't really, it's hard to dive in, because if you try to dive in, there's just so much information. If you learn about networking, there's a whole field dedicated to that. You want to learn about forensics, there's a whole field dedicated to that. And I wasn't able to find like a good starting place to basically compile a list of just really good resources. So I thought, what the hell, I'll try and make one. And so it's in the process. It's called the Cyberbear. I gave a presentation on it. It's not really finished at all. It's a work in progress. Yep, there it is over there. And so it just kind of gives you a lot of resources. That's probably the most developed page of all of them. There's some pretty good quotes from some of your people here, like Jack Patter, yours truly. Yeah. So if you're interested, that's something that exists. Being a student, it's hard to like keep it up. But that's basically a summary of the project that I've kind of been working on. So, any questions on that? Sweet. Right. I'm going to go hide behind the camera now.
Anyway, lots of stuff like that. Like check out Cyberbear, check out some of the over the wire, hack the site, hack the box, stuff like that. Really great way to learn in a kind of zero knowledge when you get started. It'll walk you through every step of the process kind of way, which is good. And that appears, yeah, that is the end of that presentation. So that's kind of fun. So let's just move these over. Now, I said I had the map pulled up, but apparently I do not. So. Alright. No, we cannot do this. Okay, faster. Alright, this is Cybersecurity, which is a really cool website that I just heard about for the first time in the last like 2 weeks. No idea how long this thing's been online. This got discussed in 234X, which is a fun little cybersecurity ethics class. Recommend taking that. But this is their cybersecurity supply and demand heat map. Long story short, there are a lot of cybersecurity job openings right now. They estimate a little over 313,000. And there are that's the number of openings, not the number of like jobs full stop. Like literally all of the companies in the country that are currently looking to hire security people in some capacity. There are 313,000 open job postings. So, probably worthwhile to get into that. According to, I'm looking at this right now, there's 2,400 in Iowa alone. If you look at that, it's kind of small text. And Iowa is not one of the darker states on the map. So,
The metro areas to see where they're gathered in the state?
yes, this is a kind of fun little view. So, as you can see, as to be expected, a lot of stuff on the coasts and your tech bubbles, but Des Moines has quite a few positions going for it. There's Iowa City. Yep, there we go. That says 1,400 in Des Moines, West Des Moines alone. So if you like Central Iowa, there's stuff going on there. While we're talking about cybersecurity in Central Iowa, SecDSM, another fantastic organization that's worth plugging at every possible opportunity. They meet once a month in Des Moines. A lot of really smart people there.
Good for networking.
Very good for networking. Extremely good for networking. Yeah, so anyway, this is a site that's very much worth going on, playing around for a little bit in your own time. I think that's more or less what we have for the 0x0 intro to hacking and cybersecurity. Okay. So I don't know, do you want to give your spiel now, or do you want, I can just keep going with the intro to Linux stuff?
Oh, that's fine, you can keep going.
This, fair warning to everyone, this might be a little bit closer to where we are than the last things. Funny how that turned out. Let's see the case. Alright, let's present this. So, with that being said, we have this intro to Linux presentation that was put together by Keen also years ago, and then I took it from the archives and made the slides different. Most of it's the same, but now I have more excuses to go on soapboxes about issues that aren't actually important. So Rules of the talk basically consist of seriously interrupt me if you have questions, because I'm going to get caught up in my own thoughts and not like notice if you're politely raising your hand. So if I don't see you with a question, yell and interrupt me. Please actually do that. If you don't understand anything, ask. This is meant to be a very beginner-friendly presentation, so if there's any concepts in here that aren't making sense, that's a great time to stop us and stop me and learn something. So, right off the bat, I'm show of hands, who here has used Linux before in some capacity? I just want to see. I'm sorry, Moody, you have a comment right off the bat. Cool, okay.
I'm just shaking my head.
That's, well, you're in the right place. Who here uses it on a regular basis? Like, I'm talking once a day, once every other day, like your main operating system, something where, cool, fantastic. So, as you can see, who uses Linux? It consists of a bunch of nerds in the security club, and then developers, system administrators, hackers, hobbyists, researchers, basically a lot of people. You know, if you're using an Android phone or most, like a lot of different little embedded devices of some kind, you're using Linux in some capacity. According to the stats from when this was put together, 2/3 of public websites are hosted on Linux servers. Yeah, lots of devices. So why do we use it? When Keen put this slide together, I think it was mostly a joke to poke fun at Windows and its eagerness to crash and force updates on you at weird times. Long story short, the reason why a lot of people will use Linux on their personal devices, like I do and like a lot of people here do, is just because it gives you a lot of control over the operating system and what's going on. Because everything's free and open source, you can read the source code, you can make modifications to it, you can control exactly what's running on your computer at any given time, which is kind of nice. Open source. If you're doing any sort of development, anything at all, being able to work in a text-based environment is just very fast and efficient, honestly. You can do anything you want on a Linux box and it won't really try and stop you. On Windows, if you want to go mess with system files, you'll have to fight through a couple levels of the operating system saying, don't edit these files, don't touch these, we're not going to show you these, we're going to make this very difficult because you'll break things. And on Linux, it more or less just says, it's your box, do whatever you want with it. So you can have fun. You can also break things and learn to fix them, which is honestly the best way to learn Linux. You might see this term pretty frequently, the star NIX. There's a lot of different Unix, Linux, lots of terms that get used semi-interchangeably, which is not correct. They refer to different things. Long story short, Unix development began in 1969, Bell Labs, due to a bunch of fun legal things happening between Bell Labs and AT&T and like the University of California and like a bunch of various entities all coming together. The GNU project was started in 1983 to make a Unix-like operating system out of free software. At this point, at this point in history, they had a lot of features put together, but there's one key piece missing: the Linux kernel that holds everything together. The important thing on this slide to take away is that Linus Torvalds is interesting. He's a fun guy to read about if you wanted to kill a couple hours of reading mailing list postings and learn how not to be an effective team player. But he really started like something of a revolution with this little passion project of his. So, yeah, that's kind of cool. This is something that people like to get really complainy about. It's kind of outside the scope of the talk, but the important thing to take away here is that GNU has put out a lot of applications, text editors and userland stuff, that run on the Linux kernel, which is just the layer that helps interface between the userland stuff and the literal hardware components of your computer. What does Linux look like? This is what, anybody know what's happening here? Look at the last line of it, you'll see a fun thing that everyone loves, kernel panic. This is what it can look like, because like I said, it gives you complete freedom to do pretty much whatever you want, including break things really badly. Yes?
This doesn't work anymore. System D doesn't like this.
Oh, really?
You can't. So this is someone sent a sig up to PID 0,
Yep.
which is what reboot does.
Yep.
And system D will catch that and then restart itself.
Oh, fair enough. Good to know.
Something, I mean,
Systemd does
I
work.
think the only way, I think it was Jake that was talking about how he got it to crash by actually forcing the registers to something for the process, and that was the only way he did it to crash that system.
All right, well, okay, so that's like a whole other thing that I should open that can of worms. Long story short, Linux can look something like this with just the, hacker on a TV show with green and white text scrolling down a black screen, and that's it. Alternatively, there's a lot of different desktop environments out there that make it look very user-friendly. You might be familiar with something like this if you're using GNOME, or this if you're using KDE, or this if you're using LXDE, or this if you're using XFCE, thank you. This one, this is my personal favorite. This is i3. This is strictly speaking, not a desktop environment, just a window manager. This is what you might have noticed earlier with Firefox making windows that were kind of sandwiched together and doing weird things. i3 just is a very completely keyboard-driven way to interface with a graphical user environment. Not really important, but it's a soapbox I can get on at length. So you can make Linux look like whatever you want. You can make this user-friendly or as user-hostile as you want, and there's a lot of different flavors of Linux out there. So these all use the same Linux kernel. They use that same central bit of code for interfacing the userland stuff with the physical hardware, but there's lots of different distributions out there. There's Debian, which is, this gets forked into a lot of things like Ubuntu and Mint, Kubuntu, stuff like that. You've got Fedora and CentOS, which are done by Red Hat. You might have heard of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is still the same free and open source Linux stuff. Red Hat sells support contracts for it, and it's rock solid stuff. And with a support team behind it, that powers a lot of the modern web as you know it. OpenSUSE is fun. Arch Linux, that's a whole can of worms that I'm not going to get into. It's really fun. It's a great way to learn about Linux. I'm not going to get into it. So, lots of ways you can get into using Linux if you've never used it before. You can, if you have Windows 10. Microsoft introduced the Windows subsystem for Linux, which allows you to run Bash on Windows 10. Yes?
Still strictly worse than Cygwin.
Yes, it is strictly worse than Cygwin. You can just install Cygwin, which I've seen in a lot of the labs in Vancouver if you're taking computer classes.
185.
Yeah, if you've taken or are taking Computer 185, you are very familiar with Cygwin. Then you can get the Bash on Windows 10, which is not ideal. You can dual boot, which is understandable. A lot of people will dual boot, especially if they care about keeping Windows around for games, AAA brand new releases that don't play nicely with Linux yet. You can spin up a virtual machine, which is very simple and a great way to just have a self-contained environment where no matter what you do, nothing really matters. And then, genuinely, the best way to learn about Linux is to just make it your main operating system and use it every day. It will definitely involve a lot of Googling things, a lot of looking at wiki pages and forum posts and Stack Overflow and trying to understand why is this setting not working, why can't I connect to this Bluetooth device, whatever. It'll involve some of that. It's fairly straightforward at this point, but it'll make you learn things, learn how to use it, and generally that is what is recommended as the best way to learn. If you don't care about having a pretty graphical interface and running it on your own laptop, all of you have access to a number of Linux servers hosted so kindly by the university here. So if you're just an engineering student, Linux Remote 1 through 5, so Linux Remote 1, Linux Remote 2, something like that, engineering.iastate.edu. If you are an electrical, computer engineering, cybersecurity engineering, I think software engineering student, you can go to linux-1, 2, 3, whatever, .ec.iastate.edu. And ComS students, Pyrite I think is still up. I'm not a comp sci person, so it is cool. Okay, Pyrite still exists. Yep, connect to those via SSH, which I think we get into that. Yeah, so if you're on Windows, you can just install PuTTY, give it the address that you're connecting to, and it'll let you just hop onto a Linux system, play around, learn, get used to it. If you are on Mac OS, you can just say SSH and tell the server you're getting into. Same deal on Linux, but I mean, you're already on Linux at that point. So what, you connect to a Linux box, or you install Linux on your computer. What are you going to see? What's going to happen? You'll either see a root at localhost, or you might see the username that you created at install time at localhost, and maybe a $sign instead of the hash sign. You will more likely than not be dropped into a bash shell, the born again shell. That is the most popular shell out there. I don't have any numbers on that, just like, but come on, I'm pretty sure that's the case. Lots of other shells exist, all great ways of interacting with your operating system.
Mac has actually moved to Z shell.
Mac moved to Z shell.
Yeah, that's the default. They replaced bash with the more bloated.
Okay, so some people have some very strong opinions about the differences between these shells. For your purposes, if you're just getting the Linux for the first time, you'll be almost certainly using bash, and that's fine. These can all be treated the same. If you ever want to get Moody and I into a fight, come ask us about the difference between Z shell and like the C shell or something, and see what happens.
KSH is the best one.
KSH is like good, but Z shell is better. So you get into this shell, and what are you going to do? Here's like 3 of the first commands that you will learn from any tutorial ever, or the Computery 230 Linux labs or anything like that. CD is the change directory command that'll move you around to different points on the system. LS will list the contents of a directory so you can see what you're looking at. And PWD tells you where exactly you are. So with those 3 commands alone, you can traverse wherever you want on your Linux system and look at what files exist where, which is a good bit of fun. If you go to the root directory, which if you've sat through any of my 230 labs, you've seen me emphatically draw that single slash on the board and say this is the root directory. All of these directories exist underneath the root directory and contain lots of very interesting files organized in a way that like, genuinely makes sense, though it is a little overwhelming at first. Long story short, you'll be in a subdirectory of the home directory where just your user files are kept. And that's where, like if you're just making stuff to play with file creation and permissions and stuff like that, it'll all take place there. Let's see, this is a universal truth as spoken by Jake Dreos. More that 90% of using a Unix-like OS is just moving around and editing config files, learning how to fly at typing paths with tab and the up arrow is important, and then the other 10% is magic commands, which just go read the manual pages. I think we'll learn about that. Long story short, being able to, on Linux boxes, you can push tab to complete commands that you're writing. It'll intelligently fill in based off what you started to type. It'll fill in paths, it'll fill in command names, stuff like that. Up arrow lets you cycle through commands that you've run before. Be good at that, and suddenly you look like every hacker in every TV show who's just making stuff appear on the screen at the speed of light and do all kinds of random nonsense. And then read the manual pages because that's how you organize. Let's see. File manipulation stuff. These are 3 important things to know. Copying files, move things around, or making copies of files. Move lets you move things around, and delete lets you remove stuff. So that's pretty straightforward. If you ever see, sometimes it shows up in, I think, 10, 11, Cougar, or whatever the 230 lab is, people write fun things on the board about rm/rf/ because they think they're very funny. That's the command to recursively delete every file in the root directory and force it to continue despite the operating system protesting about that. As a rule, don't follow commands that are just written on whiteboards if you don't understand what they do. If you take anything away from this talk, it is don't just run commands you see written on whiteboards, especially at this university. Basic file manipulation. You can create files and you can create directories. That's, not a lot to explain there. Make files, make folders, and put them in. Here are probably 3 of the most useful commands you can run when you're actually trying to see the contents of a file. Cat lets you just spit out the contents of a file. Less is the spiritual successor to more, which was another pager, which basically you can feed it a file and it'll let you view it in pages instead of just dumping everything out into your terminal, which is nice. And then tail lets you read the last couple lines of a file and follow the file as it's created the right flags. Yes?
Less is more than more.
Less is more than more. That is why less is the spiritual successor to more. More was less good than less.
One of which you wrong on one doesn't.
Beyond the scope of the talk.
Oh,
Editing files. This is a literal holy war discussion. Long story short, you run any editor command you want on a file, it'll let you edit the file. Makes sense. Nano is easy. It prints out a little bar at the bottom of the screen that tells you all the commands, so how to use Control-X to exit it or Control-O to write out the file and save it. It also exists everywhere. I never installed it on this computer, and yet it's there. It's just shipped with the kernel. Strictly speaking, Ed is the default editor, but don't at me, movie. It's Ed is not good for people who are just getting into Linux. Nano is just omnipresent, and you don't need to learn Nano because it always has a help screen printed, so you can always see what's going on. Vim is strictly more difficult than Nano because it does not have a help screen that shows you everything. However, there are some great tutorials baked into any system that has Vim on it that will teach you how to use Vim. This is the VI improved editor. VI is like fine, Vim is fantastic. And then Emacs, I say it's very involved, mostly because it has a lot going on there. Emacs it's very powerful, and you can do a lot of things with it, but I don't like it because I agree with the Vim people in the Holy Wars. Long story short, a lot of people have a preferred editor, and there's like a long-running joke of people fighting over what editor is the best. Vim people are right. That isn't the official stance of our cabinet or anything like that, because we're not allowed to is it? Are we actually going to make that? Can we adopt that? Yeah. I'm going to fight for this going to the Constitution now, actually. Vim is fantastic. I highly encourage that you learn how to use it. It's not as complicated as everyone pretends that it is. And once you get good with it, it really speeds up your time for just editing a basic config file somewhere or developing whole programs. Like for classes at this university, I've written entire shells using Vim as the only editor the entire time because it's good and I'm used to it. I could soapbox about that for literal hours. Moving on, file permissions and ownership stuff. If you had 230 Lab this week, you played with this. That's kind of fun. Long story short, all files have a set of permissions attached to them, which say who can read the file, who can write to the file and edit it, who can execute the file if it is a program that's executable. Same goes for directories. You can choose who can read the contents of the directory, who can write files to the directory, and who can CD into the directory. And the sets of permissions you can see there on the far left-hand side of that output from a terminal includes first the rights for the owner of the file, then the rights for the group that the file is, the rights of users who are in the same group, and then rights for the world at large, anybody on the system. Which, yeah, that's, if you compete in a CDC, which, by the way, compete in the CDC is a fantastic way to learn things. File permissions becomes a big thing because that's how you keep someone from reading files they shouldn't. At least it's the first line of defense.
Hey, when does the CDC start this year?
When does the CDC start this year?
The CDC scenario has been released. You can go to signup.ish.org to sign up. The theme of the competition is construction company. Moody, what do you have to say that I keep accidentally stumbling over you on?
Competition's actually the 11th of October.
That's a Friday.
Saturday,
So
well,
it's
the
It's
12th.
the 12th.
Well, I mean, it's like the 11th and 12th.
On-site setup will begin on the 11th. The actual competition with the red team takes place on the 12th. Seriously, I cannot stress this enough. Joining a team and competing in the CDC, even if you have no idea what the hell is going on, is one of the best ways to learn about security, networking, stuff in general. Yes?
So, say I'm in the CDC, which
Yes.
I'm in,
Yes.
and I get a box that the white team has been kind enough to screw permissions on.
They will do this.
Yeah. How should I tell what the permission should be for files? If I've never seen those before.
Generally, a general rule of thumb is like if when in doubt, 664 is a pretty good one. That's I think that's read and write to user and execute and read for everything else.
Execute would be 7, just read it.
Oh, is it just
Yeah.
read?
Just
Yeah.
it's
Read,
right.
Read, write, read.
Yeah, so directories need, so, I mean, essentially, the only one that's really important is the others. The users and the groups can pretty much be the same. Users, you generally have read and write. If you need other people to be able to use it, then they probably need read and execute with that. If you have a directory, then you need to execute on the directory in order to list the directory. It's kind of archaic and weird, but you just kind of gotta know it.
That's the X, by the way,
Yeah.
on each of those.
And-
So it goes read, write, execute. The first three is for the user you currently have, or next, RWX is for the group, and all users is the one after that. So like top one is, the top file there is only accessible with the user you currently logged in as.
Is the first three for the user you're logged in as, the owner?
The owner,
Alright.
yeah, which is team, who is in group team.
Yes.
So how do you feel about the owner can read, write, execute, everybody else gets nothing?
So if you have a directory and someone else needs to look at the directory, then if they don't have execute, they can't list it. If you like that, then you sure you can have that. If you have a binary, like for example, a lot of your binaries in /bin are owned by root, and if no one else can execute them besides root, you're going to have a really bad time.
Changing directories, that's a binary.
If you change the permissions in /bin or /user, sbin or something like that to be, owner is the only one who can read, write, execute, nobody on the system but root will be able to list the contents of a directory, to change directories, to copy a file, remove a file. So this is where the green team comes in for CDC stuff. You have actual users trying to do actual tasks on your box, and if they can't do that, you get in trouble. Also, like that might just break some other system stuff. The great thing about virtualized Linux environments, especially in the CDC, is you can just do stuff until it breaks, and then undo that and just roll with that or something. Like you're more than welcome as blue team to just start breaking your own stuff and figure out what the just how far you can push the limits.
We give you snapshots for a reason.
Yes.
They're very useful.
Yeah, what is CDC?
Fair enough. I guess we so CDC, the Cyber Defense Competition. It is an event put on every semester here at Iowa State University by the wonderful group over at the IASG lab. Who actually, do one of you guys want to talk about it? Like this is your director. Yeah, do it. You're the competition director.
I got it. So, hello, my name is Jacob Moody. I'm the director for the next upcoming Cyber Defense Competition. So, kind of give you a brief overview of what it is for anyone that's new here and hasn't had a chance to kind of look at it. What it is essentially it's a simulated environment where you get to you're given a series of virtual machines or servers, and we kind of create a mock corporate environment. You're given a month to make a team, to prepare your boxes, secure them. We give them to you in oftentimes insecure states, poorly configured states, backdoor states. I mean, the idea is that you basically came across these boxes at a company that may have fired their entire IT staff 6 months ago. You'll have a month to set up. On the Fridays before the competition, we open the CLA up. Everyone can come in and get set up. It can plug directly into the network that the VMs are on. And you'll have then to work, and then at 8 a.m. on that next Saturday, we start the attack phase. So that means you will be defending in real time all of the servers that you've configured and set up against a team of volunteers that we have that are oftentimes industry professionals that have come from backgrounds of doing that for quite a while. So they'll come in and they'll try to break into your stuff. And while that's going on, we also have a green team. So you're the blue team, the red team is the hackers. There's a green team, which is your users. Because you can have the most secure system in the world, but if no one can use it, then there's really no point to having a system, really, if you think about it. So the green team is kind of our way of doing sanity checks to make sure that whatever systems you've set up are still usable by people. So we have a group of volunteers that will come in and act as your users and try to use your system. And then during the competition, we have anomalies or kind of like little puzzles or tasks that we give out during the day, which range anywhere from programming to reverse engineering to binary exploitation, kind of topics that range around the ideas of programming and kind of information security. And so that there's one, we put on 2 internal ones for just ISU students. There's one this semester and one next semester, and if you do very well in this one, there's also a national competition where we invite other four-year universities from around the country to come and compete as well. So if you do well in that first competition, you can come back for the national competition in the beginning of the second semester. So if anyone has any questions about any of that or would like to know, I guess we can put it up there. If you'd like to get interested, if you like to get involved with this kind of thing, which we encourage people, if not even if you're just if you're familiar with it, but if you're just brand new to this idea, it's good to kind of get some experience with it. We are very friendly. We host what we call lab jams twice a week. This first one will be starting this Sunday at
7 to 9.
7 to 9 p.m. in
Somewhere in Vancouver.
somewhere in Vancouver. It'll, yeah, so,
10, 12 or
the-
something like that.
if you come in there and you just have questions about getting started or how to configure machines or trying to find a place to work together with your teammates, we offer those, and we'll be there to help support as well. If this kind of stuff sounds interesting to you, there is a URL that we have to get signed up. Wow, this marker, very good. Sign up. IASG.org. So go there, and you can not only create your account to get started, it'll have information about the scenario, so the kind of the rules of the competition or the specific ones that we're putting on for this October. It'll also allow you to find other people that are looking for teammates, and you can get in contact with them through their emails and start communicating with them and seeing how things are going. If you'd like to get your own group together, you can create teams with that system as well. So that's kind of like the entry point to getting started. So does anyone have any questions about any of that or anything I talked about regarding the cyber defense competitions? Yes.
Will food be provided?
Yes. On Fridays, we provide pizza.
Of the competition.
On the Friday for the
Not
competition.
every Friday.
Not every Friday. Yeah, we don't have that much money. But yeah, so the Friday before the competition, we order a bunch of pizza, not unlike how we have pizza here. And during the Saturday mornings, we provide coffee and pancakes.
We'll have pancakes Saturday morning.
And then usually like walking tacos.
I think this year will be tacos.
Tacos cooked by Doug. So you get some Doug cakes and some Doug tacos, which are very delicious, very good time. And then competition's over at like 5 p.m. It's a lot of fun. There's kind of we have employers that come. We have Union Pacific, John Deere, PwC. What's the last one? No, there's one more that came for the first time last time. What were the Emerson? More. With 1+1. There's one more that I can't remember at the top.
There's corporate sponsors that are there to give you free energy drinks and food and to collect resumes and talk to you about your experience there. So if you're looking for an internship or you just want free pizza, t-shirts and stuff like that, or you want to learn these things but in like a real environment, do it.
I've had a lot of places that I've talked to. They look if they're very familiar with kind of what we do here in terms of cybersecurity. They're always looking for kind of that cybersecurity competition. It's kind of a good way of getting that kind of pseudo real world experience with doing stuff. During the competition we also have stuff like if you get broken into, it's not game over. We have earn back points if you can help diagnose why you got broken into, which is a huge part of forensic analysis. Everything's on fire, your server rack's in flames, and you can't really do much. But the important part is now what? Well, now you have to go in there and you have to send very legal emails to your clients and say, well, we're sorry, but we kind of messed up, and now, so that's half the battle, is after something has happened, how to properly respond and not sink your company under the water in doing so, which has happened to quite a few of them. But yeah, so questions, comments, anything of the like, see where if you're interested. Like I said, if you're new or you kind of want to get into it, it's a great way of getting kind of into the cybersecurity stuff, all of this stuff too. I guess I'll next club, should I do that?
Go for it, man. You're up here.
Since I'm up here, this stuff is interesting. You want to learn more about Linux, or you are not familiar with Linux and you want a group of people to kind of learn more about Linux. There is a kind of a cousin club to IASG, which is the GNU/Linux Club. We meet Wednesdays from 5 to 6 in Pearson 3119. So if you're interested in more of this, specifically the Linux stuff, the operating system stuff, systems level programming, I'll be there. I'm serve as the vice president there, so that's a good place to come.
Thank you. Alright, I'm just going to fly through what's left of this. We talked about file permission stuff and everything. There's lots of fun ways you can edit file permissions to make things impossible to use by anybody, which is a lot of fun. Let's see. system commands for finding out who you are. This is if you ever do capture the flag stuff and you break into a box, you start with things like ID and who am I to find out exactly what kind of permissions you have on that box. Let's see, you got the killing processes. That's a lot of fun because sometimes that breaks everything horribly, and sometimes that's just like a really satisfying way to close a program. It's decided to stop responding. If you've ever been on Windows and told the task manager to kill something and then it just doesn't die, or the task manager stops responding, or something like that happens, that sucks. On Linux, when you say, hey, kill this program, it dies instantly, and it's
Not instantly, the next time the process crosses the kernel user space barrier.
yes, okay. As far as you are concerned, it dies instantly, and it's very satisfying. Let's see, commands, learn these, live these, love these. Man shows manual pages, Aperture finds manual pages, what is, where is, which, help you learn what something is, where it is, and which command you're running when you do it. And almost literally any Linux command program under the sun, you can feed it tab H or tab help, and it will teach you how something is supposed to be used. Other useful programs, I put this one in last night because I enjoy these. HTOP is a process monitor, but better. It's very colorful and interactive and gives you a one button interface to satisfyingly kill programs. LS, and then any of those, LS block, CPU, USB, MEM, stuff like that will let you interface pretty directly with what's going on with your block devices. So storage, CPU will show you information about the processors on the machine, USB devices, memory, stuff like that. tar is an archive utility that, again, people like to pretend that it's archaic and hard to understand. There's like 2 tar commands you need to know and they'll get you here with basically anything. Curl lets you grab fun stuff over the internet. Curl weather.in aims if you want to get a cool thing to show you what the weather's like here. Curl parrot.live and then get a dancing bird in your terminal. Neither of those are important at all or like key Linux concepts, but honestly, they're a lot of fun. Yeah, that is our longer than was meant to be unhinged rambling about Linux and basic Linux commands and the like. If anybody has any questions, shout them out now, show up in Slack and ask them, do anything. Somebody, questions, comments, ask me to rant about them some more.
Or come to the Linux Club and ask them.
Or if you want to know how these things work, go to the Linux Club and they'll get into the weird, archaic systems level stuff that was written in the 80s that makes these things tick, which is actually very fun.
5 to 6 Wednesday, Pearson.
3119. We also have a Piazza, if no one, if anyone's used that.
Yeah, it's the only club I know that has a Piazza, but there is in fact a Piazza.
The Piazza's pretty fun, I don't know what you're talking about.
Slack.
No one likes it.
All right, so if there's no questions right now, that was our beat you over the head with some Linux stuff that you should know. The big takeaways from this should be put Linux on a machine and use it and break it and wonder why nothing is working when you thought you did something very straightforward and simple, and then that makes you a better Linux user because you learned why you broke it and you don't break it again.
Why or how?
Hmm?
Why or how?
Yes. There's, yeah, I don't know. Long story short,
It's easier to live by doing.
yes, like these, as you might have realized, I just yelled a lot of stuff at you and I expect that you took away not very much of it because you're not like sitting at a terminal typing in commands. So get yourself a Linux box, connect to a university Linux box, break things, learn why you broke things, learn how to break things, and if you like breaking things, you can get a career in breaking things. So that's my time. Thanks for listening to my unhinged rambling. Yep, that's it. I'm good at ending these things.